All right, so we've got here, we're recording on here and recording on here. Okay, perfect. G'day guys, and welcome to another live edition of Investing in the US podcast. We're here at the Intelligent Real Estate Investing Conference here in Marina Del Rey in sunny California. And today I have with me Nate. Nate, how are you, mate? Welcome to the show. Do you want to tell a little bit about what you do and who you are and how you got involved in the cannabis industry?
Sure, yeah. Appreciate you having me. So I'm basically a commercial real estate mortgage broker.
Okay.
I do debt and equity placement across all property types, all pieces of the capital stack, really nationwide. But I've financed several cannabis real estate deals now, primarily loans for either cannabis operators that own real estate or for real estate investors that are acquiring assets to lease to cannabis tenants.
Okay, so do you want to maybe walk through the history of the cannabis in the United States? How has it changed? Because it's obviously changed quite significantly. Right. And maybe you want to just give a history lesson for those people out there listening in about what happened and why all of a sudden this green rush has come to the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So cannabis obviously has a long and sordid history in the U.S. That goes pretty far back, and we don't have to get into all the details of how it became illegal and all that. But what's really important for this audience is what's happening now, which is the majority of states, I believe over 50% of the states in the U.S., I think something like 29 or maybe more, have some form of legalized cannabis, whether that's medical cannabis or even recreational now. I think 6 or 8 states maybe have recreational cannabis, and California, of course, is one of them. And in California specifically, a couple years ago, they passed Prop 64, which was the state bill or the proposition that ended up making recreational cannabis legal. And now there's a pretty significant opportunity for real estate investors to go acquire assets that are going to be occupied by cannabis tenants, because you can command a premium because it's still federally illegal.
So talk to me about some of the risks involved with how this came about, and how some of the current administration's talking about that could potentially take it away. Right?
Yeah, so the big risk around cannabis is the fact that it's still federally illegal. And depending on how you're operating the business, there's a variety of risks. I mean, everything from federal to criminal consequences around that. But for a real estate investor, really, because you don't touch the plant, you're really just a real estate investor that's buying a property and leasing it to a tenant. The tenant just happens to be an operation that is technically federally illegal, even if it's legally licensed and allowed at the state level. So what that means is your primary risk is going to be federal asset forfeiture. Now, I don't believe that recently there's been any successful forfeitures. I'm not certainly would say I'm an expert on that. But my understanding is that Obama kind of created a policy of the federal government basically backing off. There was a memo that they created called the Cole Memo, which basically said that the federal government was not going to pursue any enforcement action against medically licensed cannabis operations in states that have a robust cannabis regulatory environment. Now, Jeff Sessions, about a year ago, rescinded the Cole Memo, and that caused kind of a stir in the investment space around cannabis. We actually were attempting to acquire some assets to be leased cannabis operators at that time, and we had some investors pull out as a result of that. But in addition to the Cole Memo, which again now is not in effect anymore, there's another federal protection, which is there's a annual budget rider called FAR that basically limits the federal government's ability to spend money out of the federal budget prosecuting in medically licensed cannabis operations in states that have a robust market. Now, Warbarker, who's a congressman from Southern California, I believe he was defeated just this week in his midterms. So how that's going to affect that, I frankly really don't know.
But historically, there's always been medical marijuana, right? For helping with schizophrenia or mental health issues or pain management.
Yeah, cancer was the primary one.
Right, but the big change recently has just been more for the recreational use, right?
Right.
And was it Denver or Washington were the first?
Colorado, I think, was first. And
yep.
then Washington was a pretty close second, and I believe Oregon as well, and then obviously California.
Right. And just to be clear for everyone out there that you are helping with the real estate transaction side, not necessarily the business of running grow crops or something like that.
No. So everything I do is on the real estate. I mean, so I'm a commercial real estate mortgage broker. I do all property types. I just happen to have financed some real estate loans on properties that are going to be utilized by cannabis. In some cases, it was for investors that had acquired a cannabis asset or assets that were released to cannabis operators. And then I closed a loan for one of the largest operators, and I won't name them, but one of the biggest operators in the state of California.
Okay. So as a real estate owner myself, how would I be not protected or protected? We spoke a little bit about it, sort of like owning a retail shop, and you could have a McDonald's in there, you could have a Bunnings warehouse or a Home Depot, but how do you not get, as the owner of the real estate, sort of dragged into any sort of legal mumbo jumbo if someone was sued because they're an operator of marijuana, operation?
That's frankly probably more of a lawyer question.
Sure.
Which I'm definitely not.
Yeah. But is there any risks out there that Trump may take it away? Like, I guess there's always risks, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We really don't know, right? Now, and there's a lot of different opinions around that. Everyone in the industry kind of, expects that it'll be federally descheduled, and the people usually say 3 to 5 years, which to me is kind of a BS answer because it's just a safe one, because it's far enough out that, it's unpredictable and it's still kind of near term. I'm personally of the mindset that federal deschedulization is going to come a lot quicker than people expect.
Okay.
For a variety of reasons. One, I think there was a poll a year or so ago that over 90% of Americans support medical cannabis, and I think close to 70% support recreational. And on top of that, obviously there's a huge business opportunity around that. And Trump, of course, is a businessman at heart. Right. And now Canada, just a week ago, federally legalized cannabis at the recreational level across their entire country. And we're seeing a ton of investment going on there, deals that are happening. And Canada has a population, I think, of something like 36 million people, and here we have 320 million, 30 million. Right. So the size of our market is an order of magnitude larger. Yeah. So, and one thing that's really key to understand about cannabis is it is an incredibly unique business opportunity because of the fact that it's already an existing market. Right. Demand is there. Right. We don't have a lot of transparency into that because it's been a legal market, but people are consuming cannabis all over the country. The market's there. All we're doing is taking what technically is a legal market or has historically been and creating a legal market. Right. So in building out all that supply chain infrastructure that needs to support that market, and that's where the real estate really comes into play.
Got it. So from a lending point of view, if I'm going to go look at a piece of dirt to put an operator in there who's cannabis operator, what am I sort of looking at from a leverage point of view right now? What are you seeing in the market?
So that's a really good question, and I'll kind of give you a long answer.
Yeah, sure.
Because cannabis is federally illegal, you cannot go to a conventional lender to finance your real estate because a federally chartered bank is not going to do that deal.
Interesting.
And so as a result of that, on the real estate side, your options are unleveraged private money funds and family offices that are lending off their own balance sheet. Cool. And that's basically it. And so as a result of that, right now I think I have close to 45 lenders on my list that are cannabis friendly, all private money funds and family offices, and the overwhelming majority of them are underwriting the same way, which is they're looking at the non-cannabis value of that asset relative to that market, and they're going to lend you something like 50 to 70% of that. So, for example, I closed a loan 2 weeks ago in San Francisco. It's a retail property that's being converted to a cannabis usage, and very, very strong sponsors, backed by a fund out of the East Coast, great infill location, really solid piece of real estate. They're acquiring on a non-cannabis basis, which is the smart way to do this. And they had an executed lease in hand at close with a major operator in Northern California. So all the pieces are kind of put together on the deal. And we did that loan with a family office, lent off their own balance sheet, and that came in at about 9% and a couple of points to the lender.
Okay, so just to summarize, you've got private lenders, high net worth individuals, because the banks are federally regulated.
Federally chartered bank is not going to risk their charter to do a cannabis deal. Right. That said, there is a federally chartered bank in Southern California that I have a very good relationship with that is looking at a sizable loan for me across a portfolio of industrial properties that are leased to cannabis assets that are owned by a very, very high net worth sponsor that would provide a personal guarantee for the loan. They haven't closed on that, but they're looking at it.
Okay, interesting. So you're slowly seeing the shift happen, right? So it's just to summarize what I was just saying before, is that you've got high net worth individuals providing the debt option for someone who is looking to start a marijuana
Well, it's all in the real estate.
All in real estate, right. So they're underwriting it as if, well, hang on, this marijuana operator may go bust, and I might have to bring in a CVS or someone else,
Right.
and they're underwriting, so they've got a downside protection to their investment.
For the most part, but here's the thing, it's all the reversionary value of that asset on a non-cannabis basis is relative to that market.
Right.
Retail in infill San Francisco, there's a million things you can do with that.
Right.
Things worth a lot, right? I closed a loan on a property in Desert Hot Springs out here in Southern California, which is kind of a cannabis hotspot. Because after Prop 64 passed, the city was very quick to allow licensing for cannabis uses. Now that's a deal in that location is a different animal because that market does not have a deep, robust industrial market. So you take the cannabis usage away. I mean, whether the developer agrees with me or not, you don't have a lot of stuff you can do with that property.
Right. So they're really hedging their fact on that cannabis is here to stay, and nothing's going to it's not going to go away, because if that falls over, which there's a risk it may do, anything.
No one expects this industry to go away or the feds to try and shut everything down tomorrow, but it could happen, right? And that's why cannabis real estate owners can command a premium on the rents, usually something like 2 to 3x what the standard market rents.
2 to 3 times?
2 to 3x.
Wow.
Yeah, if you're doing a cannabis real estate deal right as an investor, you should be getting 2 to 3x market rents effectively, and you should be hitting an unleveraged yield on cost on that asset of something like 10 to 12%.
Okay.
So as a result of that, if you go get 60% leverage at 10%, your debt basis or your cost basis around the debt, given that unleveraged return, is very minimal.
Sure. What advice do you have to people out there looking at a potential plot of land to understand the viability of having a cannabis tenant given different submarkets around the country?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and the answer is it depends on the local market and the licensing requirements around.
Okay. What are you looking for typically?
Well, it just depends, because specifically in California, each city you have to get a state license and a local license. And the local license would come from your local municipality or county, wherever the authority having jurisdiction is. And in California, to get the state license, you have to get a local license. And each city has to pass their own licensing ordinance that establishes their licensing requirements and taxation and regulatory framework. And so as a result of that, to answer your question, depends. Depends if you're in LA, which has an ordinance that has some issues with it that make the licensing process here somewhat cumbersome.
Sure.
Versus Desert Hot Springs, where you kind of show up, you got a piece of dirt, you're in the green zone, and it's like, high five, here's a license.
Got it.
So it really just depends.
So your answer is more the fact that if someone out there is listening to this and going, I want to go and start my own thing, really get knowledgeable on the local municipality, and if they will allow it, and you may have to change your submarket if it doesn't allow that particular operation to exist.
And at the end of the day, it's the cannabis operator that is ultimately licensed. Now, the real estate needs to be compliant with regards to whatever the local requirements are, but at the end of the day, it's your tenant that's going to be licensed. So you may tie up a great piece of real estate in a great market for cannabis, but if you don't vet your tenants properly and you bring in some guys who aren't experienced or they don't have a good pathway to licensing, or they have poor consultants or whatever, then they ultimately may not get it. And now you've tied up a piece of dirt or a property that you may not realize that income.
Sure.
Any different municipalities even sometimes have limitations on the quantity of licenses. So again, vetting that tenant is hugely important, because if they are not capable of executing on getting a license in timely fashion, that piece of real estate may never be able to get licensed, and now all that additional value that you would have gotten from the cannabis usage goes away.
Right. So, in summary, what do you think the future holds for the cannabis industry, the lending industry, and just federally? Let's take the federal off the table. But where's everything headed to?
The federal is important because, as every other state, here's what's going on: is you have the more progressive states that legalize cannabis first. They're realizing a ton of money from tax revenue that it produces. So conservative states start seeing that, and we're starting to see more and more of them kind of shift over. They're going to continue to do so because they're missing out on all the taxes that are right next door.
Denver's raking it in, right?
It's huge, man. Yeah, you think about California specifically, although we're looking at deals nationally, but just a market here in California, we have 39.5 million people. It's a huge market, right? Yeah. So that alone is going to push legalization to eventually cover the whole country. But what's really you need to understand is that until it's federally legal, your primary source of capital on the debt side is going to be private money lenders for all the reasons we discussed. Right. What's really interesting to think about is, let's say I amass a portfolio of cannabis assets during that time period, and even if it takes 5 years for the feds to deschedule it, great. The day it's federally descheduled and legalized, now I can go to conventional real estate lenders at a conventional debt, cost of debt at whatever that is at that time.
5-6% rather than, I'm sure it's quite high right now. You're saying 9-10%.
Yeah, I mean it's going to range. The lowest rate I think I've ever seen is 8.5% for a super good sponsor, and the highest is going to be 13 or 14.
So hard money rates, essentially.
Effectively, yeah. The one in Desert Hot Springs, which was with a very, very strong operator, but because of that location and the poor non-cannabis value, that was pretty far north of 10%.
Got it.
So once we can use conventional, or once we can access conventional financing for cannabis, it changes the game. So now you got a great portfolio of assets that have seasoned cash flow with ideally good sponsors and operators in there that you can go put cheap debt on, and you might double your cash flow.
Right. So number one piece of advice for someone looking at getting started in this game, come speak with you, obviously. But what else what other advice would you have?
Know your local market. Okay. If you want to get in the cannabis space, you really need to understand the regs for that specific location. Again, it varies by municipality, at least in California. Other states might be a little different.
Yeah. Mate, people want to reach out to you to understand what you do and be in your sphere a little bit more, because I know it's a very niche market. You are dealing with institutional investors, is that correct?
Well, again, I do all types of commercial real estate, not just cannabis. So, I mean, every.
But you've got a name for yourself as the cannabis lending guy.
For better or worse, I'm becoming the cannabis real estate debt guy.
Hey, man, niche till it hurts, right?
Yeah, right. There you go.
So where can people reach you?
Yeah, so my company's called EN Capital, and my website is encapitallllc.com.
Awesome.
I'm on LinkedIn. They're pretty easy to find. So.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, absolute pleasure coming on the show. I'm really excited to see where this space goes, because I think it's a huge growth market. And just on the operational side, which we didn't really talk a little bit about, but just the sort of the headaches that with starting an operating business with no banks that will take the cash, and it's very cash intensive.
Right.
But I'm really interested to see where this space goes from a real estate investment point of view, and to see where that NOI.
The thing to keep in mind is this market is already existing.
Yep.
As it gets legalized, that legal and licensed and taxed supply chain infrastructure needs to get built out, and that means real estate.
Right. One last thing. When do you think will the Fed flip? Do you think?
I think it happened in the next 12 months, if not sooner.
Really, under this administration?
Yep.
Oh wow, interesting. That's very, very interesting. So heard it here first. And I think this administration, the federal government will change their stance on marijuana. But mate, again, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thanks for having me.
We'll do it all again next week, guys. So remember to subscribe, hit like, and take care. Be safe. Remember, happy investing. Thanks, man.